The courtroom smelled like old paper and cold coffee, like a place where people came to lose things quietly. Nora Rowan sat at the respondent's table with both hands folded over the curve of her 6-month belly, fingers locked so tightly her knuckles blanched. The air conditioning was too strong, and every time it kicked on, she felt it in her teeth. Across the aisle, Graham Locke looked untouched by the chill. He wore a charcoal suit that cost more than most people's rent, and he sat with the relaxed posture of a man who believed every room belonged to him the moment he entered. His jaw was calm. His eyes were calm. Even his breathing looked rehearsed. His attorney, Vivian Cross, the kind of woman who could turn a smile into a weapon, stood and addressed the judge as if delivering a quarterly report. "Your Honor," Vivian said, voice perfectly measured, "we are asking for temporary sole custody upon birth and an emergency financial conservatorship over the respondent. Our concern is not malice. Our concern is stability." The word stability landed like a hand on Nora's throat. Vivian continued, flipping open a folder with a soft, confident sigh. "In the past 3 weeks, Mrs. Rowan has displayed erratic behavior, paranoia, and emotional volatility. She has made public allegations that are demonstrably false. She has refused reasonable medical evaluations requested by my client. And," Nora's attorney, Sloan Park, half rose in protest. "Objection! Argumentative and speculative." "Overruled," the judge said without looking up. Nora felt her pulse thudding in her ears. She tried to breathe through her nose like her OB had taught her, slow, and counted. 1, 2, 3. Vivian's voice sharpened by a fraction. "We also have evidence that Mrs. Rowan has been influenced by an unknown third party with questionable motives." Vivian gestured to the bailiff. An evidence bag was carried forward and placed on the clerk's table. Inside it, clear plastic, sealed, sterile, was a small object that should have meant nothing. A ring, plain silver, slightly worn. A single letter engraved on the inside of the band. R. Nora's stomach dropped as if the floor had shifted beneath her chair. That ring! She knew it! Not because she'd worn it recently, because she'd seen it once, long ago, in a hand she hadn't thought about in years. In a memory that had always ended before it could explain itself. From the back row of the courtroom someone stood, not tall enough to be noticed at first, not loud, not dramatic, but when he moved, the room seemed to recognize him on a level deeper than logic. He didn't wear a suit. He wore a simple black coat, clean lines, no branding, like someone who had outgrown the need to prove he belonged. His hair was dark and slightly damp from the rain outside, and when his eyes found Nora, something in her chest, something animal, answered before her brain could. He didn't speak loudly. He didn't need to. "Nora," he said, voice low enough that it felt like it was meant only for her. "You don't have to carry his story anymore." The judge looked up, irritated. "Sir, you can't." The man lifted a hand, polite, controlled. "Apologies," he said. "I'll be brief." His gaze never left Nora. "You're not Rowan," he said gently. "Not the way he's been using it." Nora's breath caught. The man's eyes softened. "You're Ravenport." The word hit like a bell rung inside bone, and somewhere in the silence, Nora realized the most terrifying thing of all. Graham Locke wasn't scared of losing her. He was scared of losing what she had never known she was. The judge banged the gavel. "Order!" Nora blinked, and for a second the courtroom blurred, edges dissolving into rain and headlights and the metallic clink of cutlery. A different room. A different night, a different version of her, and a slap that had changed everything. But this story didn't begin in court. It began with a briefcase and a name. And the first time Nora Rowan understood that love, in the wrong hands, could be a business plan. To understand why that ring was in an evidence bag, we have to go back. 3 weeks earlier, Greyhaven was wearing winter like a disguise. The city was built on money that didn't like to be seen. Glass towers reflecting a steel gray sea, private clubs tucked behind anonymous doors, law firms whose names sounded like old families. It rained often, not dramatically but persistently, like the sky was always trying to wash something away. Nora lived high above it all, in a penthouse that looked like an architectural rendering. Too clean, too polished, too quiet. She used to think silence meant safety. Now she wasn't sure. She stood in the kitchen of that penthouse one morning, barefoot on warm stone, sipping ginger tea because her stomach had been turning for days. Her hand rested on the curve of her belly, and the baby responded with a small, impatient kick that made her smile despite herself. "You're already demanding," she whispered, half amused, half tender. The fridge hummed softly. The espresso machine blinked. The city beyond the windows moved like a distant film. On the counter sat a stack of pregnancy books, a neatly labeled vitamin organizer, and a white envelope addressed to her in perfect block letters. Nora Rowan Locke. She hadn't added the Locke. Graham had. He said it with pride at first, introducing her at events like a prize he'd earned through competence. "My wife, Nora Locke," he'd say, hand on the small of her back, steering her through rooms full of people who smiled too carefully. But lately, the hand at her back felt less like affection and more like guidance, correction, control. Graham's rules were subtle, the kind you didn't notice until you realized you were living inside them. He preferred her in certain colors, soft neutrals, nothing loud. He didn't like her meeting friends unvetted, as he put it. He insisted on being copied on her email because security. He called it protection the way some people called cages homes. At first, Nora excused it. He was a CEO. Lock Meridian was an empire of technology contracts and logistics infrastructure, visible wealth with invisible influence. He had enemies, competitors, people who wanted his downfall. She told herself his paranoia was occupational. She told herself his intensity was love. And because she'd grown up without much, without the kind of family that stayed whole, she clung to the idea that stability came with rules. Her phone buzzed. A calendar notification. OB appointment. 11 a.m. Dr. Hart. A second buzz followed almost immediately. Graham. Driver will take you. No detours. Nora stared at the message, her smile fading. No detours. As if she'd ever given him a reason to say that. She typed back, "Okay." Then she deleted it. Then she typed it again and sent it. That was the new rhythm of her life. Permission, compliance, silence. She heard the elevator chime. Footsteps. Graham entered the kitchen like he owned the air. He kissed her cheek without looking at her. His eyes were already on his phone, scrolling through something that made his brow tighten. "Morning," he said. "Morning," Nora echoed. He poured coffee, black. He didn't offer her any. He hadn't for months. His gaze slid to her belly for a second, quick, assessing, like he was evaluating a project milestone. "How are you feeling?" he asked. "Tired," she admitted. "The baby was active last night." "Good," he said, and the words sounded like approval, not warmth. "We need a healthy delivery." We need. Nora felt something small and sharp in her chest. She tried to soften it with humor. "You say that like you're talking about a product launch." Graham finally looked up. His eyes were handsome, gray, steady, but they didn't soften with the joke. "Everything is a launch," he said simply. "Everything is timing." Nora's laugh died before it was born. He kissed her again, a brief press of lips that felt like punctuation. Then he picked up his briefcase from the entryway, sleek, leather, always locked. "Tonight," he said, "Argent Room, 8 sharp." "The Argent Room?" Nora blinked. "That's formal." "It's necessary," Graham said. "For what?" He adjusted his cufflinks. "For us." A pause. Then, as if remembering how normal people spoke, he added, "Wear the green dress. The emerald one. It photographs well." Nora watched him leave the kitchen. The elevator doors closed like the end of a conversation. She stood alone with her tea and her baby and a hollow feeling she couldn't name. She told herself it was hormones. She told herself it was stress. But the truth was simpler. For the first time since she'd married Graham Locke, Nora felt like her life was being scheduled around something she hadn't been told. Something that didn't include her consent. That afternoon, the penthouse felt too bright. Nora returned from her appointment with Dr. Hart carrying ultrasound photos and a small sense of relief. The baby's heartbeat was strong. Everything was progressing normally. Normal. She wanted to cling to that word. The driver dropped her off at the building entrance as usual. The doorman greeted her by name. The elevator rose smoothly. Everything looked safe. But safety, Nora was learning, could be manufactured. Inside, Graham was already gone. Another meeting, another dinner, another urgent situation. His absence should have felt like freedom. Instead, it felt like abandonment with a security system. Nora set the ultrasound photos on the counter and stared at them. A small profile, blurred and ghost-like. A nose, a curve of skull, a future. Her future. Unless... She shook the thought away. Then she noticed the briefcase. It sat on the edge of the dining table, exactly where Graham never left it. And it wasn't locked. It was a small thing, a detail. But Nora's body reacted like it had heard a gunshot. Her throat went dry. She looked toward the elevator as if expecting Graham to step out and catch her curiosity mid-breath. Nothing. Just silence. The rain tapped the windows. Nora walked to the table. Her fingers hovered over the leather handle. She told herself she was only moving it somewhere safer. But the moment her hand touched it, she felt the weight inside. Paper, folders, a small metallic clink like a keychain. Her heartbeat became loud. She opened it. The smell hit first. Cologne and ink and something faintly metallic. Inside were neatly arranged files, tabbed, labeled, organized with a precision that made Nora's skin prickle. One folder was stamped in bold letters, Dissolution of Marriage, Draft. Her vision narrowed. She pulled it out with trembling fingers, as if the paper could bite. There it was, her name, Graham's name, terms, dates, jurisdiction, Greyhaven Family Court, a section titled Custody and Guardianship of Minor Child Upon Birth. Nora's hand flew to her belly instinctively, protective. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. She flipped pages faster, panic rising like water. Then she saw another folder. This one didn't look like law, it looked like surveillance. Investigative report. Subject, Nora Rowan. Photos. Her leaving the building. Her at the grocery store. Her at Dr. Hart's clinic. Her standing by a bookstore window staring blankly. Notes typed beneath each image. Subject exhibits signs of emotional volatility. Subject has limited social support. Subject visited father figure, Caleb Mercer, at 9:18 p.m. Unplanned. Nora's throat tightened. This wasn't protection. This was documentation. A third page. A list of names, contacts, people she hadn't spoken to in years. And then, near the bottom, a word that made her blood chill. Ravenport. Her eyes locked on it. She didn't understand why it mattered. She only knew Graham had hidden it. And hidden things, she was learning, were always the sharpest. Her phone buzzed. Graham. On my way home. Don't go anywhere. Nora stared at the message until the letters blurred. Then she heard the elevator. The doors opened. Footsteps. Graham walked in with his coat still on, like he'd never intended to stay long. His eyes snapped to the briefcase, to the files on the table. And for the first time, Nora saw something raw flicker in him. Not guilt, not shame. Anger. He moved fast, snatching the folder from her hands. "You opened my case," he said. It wasn't a question. Nora's voice came out thin. "You're divorcing me?" Graham's jaw tightened. "You weren't supposed to see that yet." Yet. Nora took a step back, clutching her belly. Yet? Graham, what is this? Why is there a custody section? Why is someone following me? Graham exhaled slowly, the way someone exhales before explaining something inconvenient. "It's a contingency," he said. "A precaution." "A precaution?" Nora's laugh was sharp and broken. "Against me?" Graham's eyes hardened. "Don't be dramatic," he said. "You're pregnant. You're emotional. That's normal." Nora flinched. She pointed at the report. "This says I'm volatile. This says I have limited support. Who wrote this?" Graham didn't answer. Nora's hands shook. "Who is Ravenport?" Graham's face changed. Not much, just enough. A fraction of a second of calculation. Then he said, too calmly, "It's irrelevant." "You wrote it in a file about me," Nora whispered. "How is that irrelevant?" Graham walked toward her, closing the distance the way he always did, like a negotiation. He lowered his voice. "Nora," he said, "let's not do this here. Not like this." "Then tell me the truth," she demanded. Graham looked at her belly again, then at her, and something in him settled. A decision. "Fine," he said. "You want the truth?" Nora nodded, barely breathing. Graham's voice became colder, not loud, just stripped of warmth. "This marriage," he said, "was a project." Nora blinked. "What?" "A project," he repeated, as if clarifying a contract term. "A strategic alignment, a timeline, resources, outcomes." Nora's skin went numb. "I married you," Graham said, "because you had value, not just you. Your connections, your history, things you don't even remember." Nora stared at him, horrified. "You married me because of my history?" Graham's mouth curved faintly like impatience. "You don't know what you are," he said, "but others do. And now, unfortunately, you've complicated the process." Nora's voice cracked. "I'm your wife." Graham's eyes flicked away, then back, unbothered. "You are the mother of my child, and you will be treated accordingly as long as you cooperate." Cooperate. Nora's breath came fast. "And if I don't?" she whispered. Graham's smile disappeared entirely. "Then I will do what I must," he said, "to protect the outcome." Nora looked down at the investigative report again. The words blurred. Volatile, limited support, emotional instability. She understood then. He wasn't preparing to leave her. He was preparing to label her, to take her baby, to take her money, if she had any. But she didn't have money. She didn't have a powerful family. She swallowed. She was Nora Rowan, a woman with a normal life, a woman who had been saved by Graham's love. Or so she'd believed. Graham picked up his briefcase, reorganizing the files with a calm that felt inhuman. "The Argent Room tonight," he said again. "We'll discuss terms." "Terms?" Nora echoed, voice shaking. Graham looked at her as if she were failing to understand a simple concept. "Yes," he said, "terms." Then he turned and walked back into the elevator. The doors slid shut. Nora stood alone in the bright penthouse, her ultrasound photos on the counter like proof of a life that might already be stolen. Outside, the rain kept tapping the glass, and the word Ravenport burned in her mind like a match held too close. The Argent Room was the kind of place where even the air had a price. Crystal lighting hung like frozen rain above tables dressed in linen so white it looked unreal. The music was jazz, soft, slow, like a heartbeat pretending it wasn't afraid. Nora arrived on time because she'd been trained to. The emerald dress Graham had chosen fit her belly like a promise she didn't trust. She felt eyes on her as she walked through the room, curiosity, appraisal, judgment. In Greyhaven, wealthy people didn't stare because they were rude. They stared because they were measuring. Graham was already seated at a corner table with a view of the city lights, his silhouette perfect against the glass. He stood when he saw her, smiling the way he smiled for cameras. "Nora," he said warmly, loud enough for nearby tables to hear, "you look beautiful." It was theater. She sat, spine straight. A waiter poured water. Graham didn't touch it. He tapped his phone once, then placed it screen down on the table like a gavel. "We need to be practical," he said. Nora's hands tightened around her napkin. "Practical about what?" Graham leaned forward slightly. "About the dissolution," he said. Nora's throat tightened. "So it's real." Graham nodded like she'd finally caught up. "It's better this way," he said. "Cleaner." "Cleaner," Nora repeated. Graham's eyes stayed steady. "We can do this privately, quietly. You can keep your dignity if you don't force conflict." Nora's laugh was short and bitter. "My dignity? Graham, you had someone following me." "That was necessary." "Necessary for what?" Her voice rose despite her efforts. "To prove I'm unstable? To take my child?" Graham's jaw tensed. "Lower your voice," he said. Nora looked around. People were pretending not to listen. They always did. She swallowed and forced her voice down. "Tell me what Ravenport means." Graham's gaze sharpened. "It means you're more valuable than you realize," he said softly. "And more dangerous." "I'm not dangerous," Nora whispered. Graham's smile flickered. "You don't get to decide that," he said. Nora's hands trembled. "You told me this marriage was a project. You said you used me." Graham's eyes held no apology. "I built what I have," he said. "I protect what I build. That includes my legacy, the child, the assets, the future." Nora's voice broke. "I'm not an asset." Graham's expression hardened with faint irritation. "Don't sentimentalize this," he said. "Sentiment is for people who can afford mistakes." Nora stared at him, the words hitting her like cold water. She reached into her purse and pulled out a single page from the investigative report, the one with the word Ravenport. She slid it across the table. "I found this," she said. Graham glanced at it. For a second, his eyes did something Nora had never seen before. They widened, not with fear, with recognition. And then his face snapped back into control, but too late. Nora's voice dropped to a whisper. "Who are the Ravenports?" Graham's fingers curled around the edge of the paper. "Where did you get this?" he asked, voice low. "My husband's briefcase," Nora said. "The one you forgot to lock." Graham's jaw clenched. "Nora," he said slowly, "you have no idea what you're digging into." "Then tell me," she pleaded. "Please." Graham stared at her for a long moment. Then he smiled. It wasn't a warm smile. It was the smile of a man who had decided the conversation was over. "Fine," he said. "You want a simple answer?" Nora nodded, heart pounding. Graham leaned in, his voice silky, cruel. "The Ravenports are the reason you exist in my world," he said. "You're a gate, a name, a signature, a key, and you have no right to hold it hostage with your emotions." Nora's breath caught. "A key," she whispered. Graham's eyes flashed. "Yes." Nora's voice shook. "So you married me because you thought I was, what, related to them?" Graham's fingers tightened. Nora's desperation turned into anger. "Is that why you're doing this? Is that why you're trying to take my baby? Because you want their money?" Graham's voice dropped to a razor edge. "Stop." Nora didn't stop. She pointed at the word again. "Ravenport. Why does that name make you look like you've seen a ghost?" Graham's eyes went dark. And then, without warning, his hand moved. The slap was sharp, not theatrical, not restrained. A sound that cut through jazz and crystal and the hum of expensive conversations. Nora's head snapped to the side. For a heartbeat, she didn't feel pain. She felt disbelief. Her cheek burned. Her ears rang. The room went still. Not silent, but suspended. People froze in their politeness. No one stood. No one spoke. Nora slowly turned her face back toward Graham, stunned. He stared at her as if she'd forced his hand. "You don't say that name in public," he hissed under his breath. "Do you understand me?" Nora's eyes filled with tears, but they didn't fall yet. She pressed a hand to her cheek. The baby kicked, startled, like it had felt the violence through her skin. Graham's face tightened. "You made a scene," he murmured, "and you're going to regret it." Nora's vision blurred. She couldn't breathe. She stood up too fast, chair scraping the floor. The room watched her like she was the spectacle, not the man who'd hit his pregnant wife. She took one step, then another, and then she felt someone beside her. A waiter, black vest, white shirt, calm hands. He placed a glass of water on the table, not for Graham, for her. "Ma'am," he said gently, voice low, "come with me." Nora blinked at him, confused. Graham's eyes snapped to the waiter. "That's enough," he said coldly. "Leave." The waiter didn't flinch. He looked at Graham the way a storm looks at a candle. "Sir," he said quietly, "you're done here." Graham's face twisted with disbelief. "Do you know who I am?" The waiter's mouth curved in something that wasn't a smile. "Yes," he said, "I do." He placed a hand lightly near Nora's elbow, not gripping, not claiming, simply offering support. Nora felt steadier just from that presence. Graham stood abruptly. "This is my wife," he snapped. The waiter's eyes slid to Nora. "Is he?" he asked her softly. Nora opened her mouth. She couldn't answer, because the truth was too big, too sudden, because her life had just cracked open. Graham's voice turned poisonous. "You don't get involved in my family matters." The waiter finally looked directly at him, and his calm voice landed like a verdict. "You don't have family matters," he said. "You have a plan." Graham's face tightened. "Who are you?" he demanded. The waiter straightened. In the light, Nora noticed his cufflinks, simple steel engraved with a single letter, R. The same letter that had burned in her mind. The waiter's voice was quiet. "Damien Ravenport," he said. The name moved through the room like electricity, a ripple, a shift. People who hadn't stood for Nora straightened now. Graham's face went pale, just slightly, just enough. Nora's breath caught. Damien Ravenport, the billionaire whose name was whispered in Greyhaven like a myth. The man whose net worth and influence were the kind that didn't need public proof. And he was standing beside her, holding the space Graham had tried to crush. Graham's jaw clenched. "This has nothing to do with you," he said. Damien's eyes didn't change. "It has everything to do with me," he replied. Then, without raising his voice, he added something that made Nora's stomach drop. "Because you hit my sister." Nora froze. The room spun. "Sister," Nora whispered. Damien's gaze softened as it met hers. And for the first time that night, Nora felt something other than fear. She felt recognition, like a door in her memory had opened a crack. "I've been looking for you," Damien said quietly, "for 25 years. Nora's knees nearly gave out. Graham took a step forward, voice sharp. "This is insane!" Damien didn't look at him. He looked only at Nora. "Come," he said gently. "Let's get you out of here." Nora hesitated, because walking away meant admitting the world she'd lived in was a lie. But staying meant letting Graham Locke write the ending. So Nora took Damien's offered arm, and together they walked through the Argent Room, past Crystal, past money, past the silence of people who hadn't helped until power arrived. Behind them, Graham's voice followed like a threat. "This isn't over," he called. Damien didn't turn around. He simply said, calm as rain, "No." And Nora felt for the first time the strange comfort of someone else speaking certainty into her fear. Outside, Greyhaven's rain hit her face like reality. Damien's car wasn't flashy. It didn't need to be. It was dark, clean, and quiet, like a room on wheels designed for decisions. Inside, the world muffled. Nora sat in the back seat, hands shaking, cheek burning, breath shallow. Damien sat across from her, angled slightly so he wasn't looming. He kept distance. He didn't touch her. That restraint made him feel safer than any protection Graham had ever offered. The driver pulled away from the Argent Room smoothly. The city lights streaked across wet glass. Nora finally spoke, voice small. You said you're my brother." Damien's eyes stayed on her, steady. "Yes." Nora swallowed. How can you be sure? Damien reached into his coat pocket and pulled out something wrapped in cloth. He unfolded it carefully. A photograph, old, slightly faded. A woman held a baby in her arms. The woman's hair was dark and damp as if she'd been caught in rain. Her eyes looked tired but fierce. The baby's face was round, eyes wide. A tiny hand clutched the woman's finger. Damien pointed. That's our mother, he said. Elise Ravenport. Nora stared at the woman's face. Something in her chest tightened. The woman's eyes. Nora had seen them in the mirror. Not exactly, not perfectly, but close enough to make her skin prickle. Nora whispered, My mother's name was Elise Rowan. Damien nodded once. Because she changed it. Nora's throat tightened. Why? Damien looked out the window for a moment, as if choosing words that wouldn't break her too sharply. Because of our father, he said. Nora's stomach clenched. My father died before I was born, she said automatically, repeating the story she'd been told. Damien's gaze returned to her. No, he said quietly. He didn't. Nora's hands went cold. Damien continued, voice controlled, but his jaw tensed slightly, like the truth tasted bitter. Silas Ravenport, he said. He's alive. He's in prison. Life without parole. Nora blinked. Prison? For what? Damien's eyes hardened. For violence, he said. For what he did to people in his path. For what he did to her. To us. Nora's mind tried to reject it. Her life had been built on the story that her birth father was gone. That her stepfather, Caleb Mercer, had saved her mother from hardship. Caleb had been kind, at least in Nora's memory. He'd taught her to ride a bike. He'd fixed leaky faucets. He'd made her pancakes. The idea of another father, a violent one, felt like a shadow someone was trying to paste onto her life. Damien leaned forward slightly. Do you remember anything before 17? He asked gently. Anything that doesn't fit with the story you were told? Nora frowned, searching. There were gaps, like someone had edited her childhood. She remembered moving a lot. She remembered her mother's sudden fear in certain places. She remembered Elise checking locks twice, 3 times. She remembered being told to never answer the door unless her mother said so. And she remembered once a name whispered during a nightmare. A name Nora hadn't understood. Silas. Nora's breath caught. Damien watched her carefully. You're remembering. Nora's voice shook. Why would she lie? Damien's expression softened. She didn't lie to hurt you, he said. She lied to keep you alive. Nora swallowed hard. Alive from him? Damien nodded once. He obsessed over control, Damien said. Over legacy, over names. He believed the Ravenport bloodline was a crown, and that everyone in it belonged to him. Nora's hands curled into fists. That's insane. Damien's voice was flat. It was our reality. He took a breath, then said, When you were an infant, she ran. She took you and disappeared. She left me behind. Nora's eyes widened. She left you? Damien's gaze darkened with old pain. She didn't have a choice, he said. She ran in the only way she could. She knew if she took both of us, Silas would chase harder. She made a calculation a mother shouldn't have to make. Nora's eyes filled with tears. Damien continued, voice quieter. I spent my childhood as Silas's possession. A son he could shape. A weapon he could sharpen. Nora covered her mouth. Oh my God. Damien's eyes flickered with something that might have been anger, contained, disciplined. I got out when I turned 18, he said. Not legally, not peacefully, but I got out. Nora's voice trembled. And you've been looking for me since? Damien nodded. I hired investigators. I chased false leads. I followed rumors. Because Elise was careful, he said. Too careful. Nora whispered, She died when I was 17. Damien's jaw tightened. That's what they told you. Nora looked up sharply. It was a car accident. Damien's eyes held hers. Was it? he asked softly. Nora's chest tightened. What do you mean? Damien leaned back as if the weight of this truth had been heavy for too long. I never accepted it, he said. A single car crash on a clear night. No witnesses, no surveillance footage recovered. The police report was tidy. Nora felt dizzy. Tidy? Damien nodded. Tidy like someone wanted it closed. Nora's throat tightened. Are you saying someone killed her? Damien didn't answer immediately. He let the rain speak against the window. Then he said, I'm saying Silas had people, even from prison. He had money that wasn't on paper. He had influence that didn't require freedom. Nora whispered, but he was locked up. Damien's mouth tightened slightly. Doors don't stop ghosts, he said. Nora shivered. The car turned, passing through a quieter part of the city. Less glass, more old stone. The kind of streets where secrets like to live. Nora's phone buzzed. She looked down. Graham, you just made the biggest mistake of your life. Come home now. Nora stared at the message, fear rising again. Damien watched her. He's already moving, he said. Nora swallowed. How do you know? Damien's voice was calm. Because men like him don't lose control gracefully. Nora's cheek still burned from the slap. Her baby kicked again, restless. Nora's voice broke. Why did he react like that when I said Ravenport? Damien's eyes narrowed. Because he's been hunting you, Damien said. Not for love, not for family, for access. Nora's stomach twisted. Access to what? Damien's gaze sharpened. To me, he said. To what I own, and to what Silas still has hidden. Nora blinked. Hidden? Damien hesitated. Then carefully he said, Silas Ravenport built a shadow fortune before he was convicted. It's not billions, nothing that obvious, but it's enough to tempt criminals and corporations alike. Enough to buy silence. Enough to buy people. Nora's voice trembled. How much? Damien's mouth tightened. Tens of millions at least, he said. Maybe more. It moves through shells and hands and favors. Nora's mind spun. And I'm connected to that? Because I'm his daughter? Damien nodded once. Legally, yes. Bloodline matters in ways most people don't realize until money enters the room. Nora felt sick. She thought about Graham's words. A key, a signature, a gate. She whispered, He married me to use me. Damien's eyes held hers, grim. Yes. Nora's tears finally fell. Not loud, not dramatic, just silent drops that traced the curve of her cheek. Damien didn't rush to comfort her. He let her feel it. He let her have the dignity of grief. After a moment, Nora wiped her face with trembling fingers. My stepfather, she said suddenly. Caleb Mercer, he loved my mom. He raised me. Damien's gaze didn't soften. We need to talk about Caleb, he said. Nora's breath caught. What about him? Damien inhaled slowly like he hated this part. My people traced information leaks, he said. Someone has been feeding details about you to Lock Meridian for 2 years. Nora shook her head. No. Damien's voice stayed gentle but firm. Nora. Nora's eyes widened, terror rising. No, not Caleb. Damien's gaze was steady. Caleb Mercer, he said quietly, has been taking payments. Nora's stomach dropped. That's impossible, she whispered. He calls me kiddo. Damien didn't interrupt. He simply reached into his coat and pulled out a thin folder, less dramatic than the one Graham had, but heavier in meaning. He slid a single page toward her. Bank transfers, dates, amounts, a pattern. Nora stared at the page until her vision blurred. Her voice came out raw. Why would he do that? Damien's eyes darkened. Because men get tired, he said, and greedy, and scared, and sometimes they convince themselves betrayal is survival. Nora felt something inside her crack, something that had been holding her childhood together. She whispered, "So I've been watched from every side." Damien nodded. "Yes." Nora's breath became shallow. "What do I do?" Damien's voice was calm, almost gentle. "You come somewhere safe," he said. "You let my team handle it. You rest." Safe. Rest. Those words sounded like a dream. Nora looked down at her belly, at the life inside her. And she realized something. If she ran, Graham would chase. If she hid, he would define her as unstable. If she stayed quiet, he would write her story in legal language and signatures. Nora lifted her chin. "No," she said. Damien blinked, surprised. "No?" Nora's hands tightened over her belly. "I'm done being moved," she said, voice shaking but firm. "I'm done being managed." Damien studied her. Nora continued, the words coming like they'd been waiting behind her ribs. "He thinks I'm a key," she said. "Then I'm going to decide what doors I open." Damien's expression shifted. Respect, cautious pride. "What are you saying?" he asked. Nora swallowed hard. "I'm saying I'm not hiding," she said. "I'm not disappearing into a safe house while he takes my name apart in court." Damien's eyes narrowed. "He will come for you." Nora nodded. "I know." Damien leaned forward. "Then let me protect you." Nora's eyes filled again, but this time the tears didn't feel helpless. "Help me fight," she said. Damien held her gaze. Then slowly he nodded. "All right," he said. "But we do it smart. We do it legally. We do it like war, without losing ourselves." Nora exhaled, shaking. Outside the window, Greyhaven's rain kept falling, steady, relentless. And somewhere in a penthouse of glass, Graham Locke was already writing emails, making calls, preparing the next move in a game he'd assumed he would win. He was about to learn something he'd never calculated for. A woman who stopped begging. Damien's world was not a mansion with guards and marble floors. It was an office that looked like a command center. Ravenport Capital occupied a quiet building in an old district. Stone walls, discreet entrances, security that didn't show off. Inside, everything was light and glass and calm voices, like wealth that didn't need applause. Nora sat in a small conference room with a blanket over her shoulders despite the warmth. A nurse had checked her blood pressure. A doctor, Damien's doctor, had confirmed the baby was fine. Fine. The baby kept kicking, as if insisting on being acknowledged. Damien stood at the window with his phone in his hand, listening. When he hung up, he turned to Nora. "He filed," he said. Nora's chest tightened. "Already?" Damien nodded. "Emergency dissolution petition, temporary custody request, temporary financial conservatorship." The words sounded like chains. Nora swallowed hard. "How can he ask for custody before the baby is even born?" Damien's gaze sharpened. "He's not asking for custody," he said. "He's asking for control. Custody is the emotional hook." Nora's hands trembled. "And conservatorship means what?" Damien's voice stayed calm. "It means he wants a court to declare you incompetent to manage your own money," he said. "So he can manage it." Nora's stomach twisted. "But I don't—" Damien cut in gently. "You do," he said. "You just didn't know it." Nora stared. "What?" Damien hesitated, then said, "Elise left something in your name when she ran. Not billions, but enough. And legally, your connection to Ravenport blood makes you a target for more than you can see." Nora's throat tightened. "So he's trying to trap me?" "Yes," Damien said, "and he's going to use something ugly." Nora whispered, "My mental health." Damien nodded. "He's already contacted a psychiatrist," Damien said. "Someone who consults for corporate families. Dr. Halden." Nora's skin went cold. "How do you know?" Damien's expression was grim. "Because Dr. Halden tried to contact you through your OB's office," he said. "He framed it as prenatal wellness support." Nora's breath caught. "Dr. Hart mentioned someone calling. I thought it was normal." Damien's eyes darkened. "It's strategy," he said. Nora pressed a hand to her belly, grounding herself. "What do we do?" she asked again. But this time the question had steel under it. Damien walked to the table and spread out documents, like a chessboard built of paper. "We build a case," he said, "and we control the narrative before he does." Nora's brow furrowed. "Narrative?" Damien's gaze held hers. "Graham is a CEO. He understands one thing deeply," he said. "Public perception." Nora swallowed. "You want me to go public?" Damien nodded. "Not as spectacle," he said, "as protection." Nora's mind flashed back to the Argent Room, the way no one moved until Damien's name was spoken. Power moved people. Silence protected abusers. Nora's voice shook. "If I go public, he'll call me crazy." Damien leaned closer. "Then we go public with receipts," he said. Nora stared at him. Damien's tone was precise. "We don't accuse without proof. We document the surveillance, the divorce draft, the custody strategy, the payments to Caleb Mercer, the attempt to manipulate your medical record. Everything." Nora's throat tightened. "Caleb." Damien's eyes softened slightly. "We don't have to destroy him publicly," he said, "but we do have to sever his influence." Nora's face crumpled. "He raised me." Damien nodded, voice quieter. "And he sold you," he said gently. "Both can be true." Nora closed her eyes. When she opened them again, something in her had changed. "Okay," she whispered. Damien's gaze sharpened with approval. "Okay?" Nora nodded. "Okay," she repeated. "I'll fight." Damien exhaled. "Then we start with the simplest truth," he said. "You were assaulted." Nora's cheek still ached when she thought about it. Damien continued. "We document it medically. We document it legally." Nora swallowed, shame rising like bile. "I don't want to be that woman." Damien's voice was quiet but firm. "You already are that woman," he said. "The only choice now is whether you let him decide what that means." The words landed. Nora nodded slowly. Within hours, things began moving like a machine. Sloane Park, the attorney Nora had barely known Damien had hired, arrived with 2 assistants and a file box. Sloane was sharp-eyed, mid-30s, hair pulled back tight like she didn't waste time on softness. She shook Nora's hand and held her gaze. "I'm not here to comfort you," Sloane said. "I'm here to protect you." Nora blinked. "That's honest." Sloane's mouth twitched. "Honesty is efficient." Damien sat at the far end of the table, quietly watching the women take control of the room. Sloane opened a folder. "Graham Locke is claiming emotional instability," she said. "He's going to push for an emergency evaluation." Nora's throat tightened. "Can he force that?" Sloane's eyes narrowed. "He can try," she said, "especially if he can make it look like you're a risk." Nora whispered, "I'm not." "Truth and optics are different in court," Sloane said flatly. "We have to manage both." Nora swallowed. Sloane continued, "We need to show a pattern. Coercive control, surveillance, attempted manipulation of medical systems, financial motive." Nora glanced at Damien. "Financial motive," she echoed. Damien nodded once. Sloane tapped the table. "Now," she said, "tell me everything that happened at the Argent Room." Nora told them. The project confession, the Ravenport name, the slap, the waiter who wasn't a waiter. When she finished, the room was silent. Sloane wrote notes fast, then looked up. "Do you have the divorce draft?" she asked. Nora nodded. "I took pictures," she said, pulling out her phone with trembling fingers. "Before he took it back." Sloane's eyebrows lifted slightly. "Good," she said. "That was smart." Nora almost laughed at the idea of herself being smart in the middle of terror. Damien leaned forward. "We also have bank transfer records showing payments to Caleb Mercer," he said. Sloane's eyes sharpened. That matters, she said. It shows planning. Nora's stomach clenched. He planned to destroy me. Sloane's voice was blunt. He planned to control you, she corrected. Destroying you is just the collateral he's willing to accept. Nora's breath caught. Damien's phone buzzed. He read something, jaw tightening, then slid the screen toward Sloane. Sloane read it and cursed softly. Nora's heart raced. What? Sloane looked up. He filed a motion claiming you're being coerced by Damien Ravenport, she said. Nora stared. He's saying my brother is kidnapping me? Sloane nodded. He's framing Damien as an opportunist manipulating a pregnant woman. Nora laughed, a sharp, disbelieving sound. He hit me! And he'll say you provoked him, Sloane said. Or that you're misremembering. Or that you're exaggerating because pregnancy hormones. Nora's hands shook. Damien's voice was low. He's escalating. Sloane nodded. So we escalate smarter, she said. Nora swallowed. How? Sloane leaned forward, eyes locked on Nora's. We go on record, she said. Not in a gossip interview, in a sworn declaration, a controlled public statement that is legally aligned. Nora's mouth went dry. Public. Sloane's tone softened, just slightly. If you let him define you as unstable in private, he wins quietly, she said. If you define yourself as a credible witness with evidence, he fights on ground he can't fully control. Nora stared at her hands. She thought about the Argent room, the way people hadn't moved, the way silence had protected him. Nora lifted her chin. Do it, she said. Damien's gaze tightened with something like pride. Sloane nodded once. All right, she said. Then you need to understand something. Once you speak, you don't get to unspeak. Nora swallowed. I know, she said. And for the first time since she'd found that divorce folder, Nora felt something dangerous and new. Not panic, purpose. The next day, Greyhaven woke up to a headline that didn't use Graham Locke's preferred language. It didn't say dissolution. It didn't say amicable separation. It said, CEO Graham Locke accused of surveillance and coercive control by pregnant wife. The statement was short, precise, legally clean. No wild accusations, no dramatized storytelling, just facts, dates, documents. A medical report confirming bruising on Nora's cheek consistent with a strike. A mention of private investigative monitoring. And a line that made the city pause. The respondent has recently learned she may have been targeted for financial exploitation linked to the Ravenport family name. The Ravenport name. Greyhaven's quiet myth, now dragged into daylight. Phones rang. Board members called. Reporters circled. Locke Meridian's stock wobbled. Graham Locke's world, built on perception, began to crack. And in a glass office 2 floors beneath his penthouse, Graham sat with Vivian Cross and watched the news feed with a face like stone. This is bad, Vivian said. Graham's eyes were cold. No, he said. This is an opportunity. Vivian frowned. An opportunity? Graham leaned back, fingers steepled. If she wants a story, he said, we give her a diagnosis. Vivian's eyes narrowed. We can't fabricate, Graham cut her off. We don't fabricate, he said. We curate. Vivian exhaled slowly. You want Dr. Halden. Graham nodded. I want an evaluation request on record, he said. I want her refusing it to look like paranoia. I want her association with Damien Ravenport to look like delusion or manipulation. I want the court to view her as emotionally compromised. Vivian's jaw tightened. She's pregnant. Graham's mouth curved slightly. Exactly, he said. Pregnancy makes the argument easier. Vivian hesitated. The slap, Graham's eyes flashed, was a mistake, he said. But mistakes can be reframed. Vivian looked away. Graham leaned forward. I built this, he said. I will not lose it because she discovered her bloodline too late. Vivian's voice was careful. And what about the Ravenports? Damien Ravenport won't... Graham's smile was thin. Damien Ravenport has money, he said. That doesn't mean he has clean hands. Vivian's eyes narrowed. Are you implying? Graham's gaze sharpened. Everyone has a shadow, he said. We just have to find the right angle. In Damien's office, the air felt tighter after the headline. Nora sat with Sloane, reading reactions online, some sympathetic, some cruel. People called her brave. People called her a liar. People called her a gold digger. One comment made her stomach turn. She's probably unstable. Pregnancy makes women crazy. Nora put the phone down, hands shaking. Sloane watched her. Don't read comments, she said. Comments are where empathy goes to die. Nora swallowed. I thought going public would help. It did, Sloane said. It forced him to move where we can see him. As if summoned by those words, Damien walked in with an expression that made Nora's pulse spike. He filed the evaluation motion, Damien said. Sloane exhaled. Of course he did. Nora's throat tightened. What does that mean for me? Sloane's eyes were sharp. It means you don't refuse, she said. Not angrily, not publicly. We comply. With our own doctors, our own evaluations, our own record. Nora blinked. But he'll use it against me. Sloane shook her head. He'll try, she said, but we don't give him the refusal narrative. Damien's voice was calm. We already arranged an independent psychological assessment with a reputable prenatal specialist, he said. Someone who won't be bought. Nora's eyes filled with tears, not from fear, but from relief at not being alone. Sloane tapped the table. Next, she said, we address Caleb Mercer. Nora stiffened. Sloane's tone stayed controlled. We need to confront him privately first, she said. Give him a chance to cooperate. If he refuses, we treat him as hostile. Nora's voice was small. I don't want to hate him. Sloane's eyes softened just a fraction. You don't have to hate him, she said. You just have to stop trusting him. Nora's hands curled into fists. Damien studied her. I'll be with you, he said. Nora nodded slowly. That evening they drove to a modest house on the edge of Greyhaven. Less glass, more brick, more ordinary. Caleb Mercer's house. Nora hadn't been there in months. It used to feel like childhood. Now it felt like a crime scene. Caleb opened the door in a flannel shirt, hair graying, eyes widening when he saw Nora. Kiddo, he said, forced brightness. What are you doing? His gaze flicked to Damien. His face tightened. Nora's voice was quiet. We need to talk. Caleb swallowed. Come in. The living room smelled like stale coffee and old furniture polish. Family photos lined the mantel. Nora, as a teenager, smiling, Elise beside her. Nora's chest tightened at the sight of her mother's face. Caleb followed her gaze and his voice softened. Your mom would... Don't, Nora said sharply. Caleb flinched. Nora pulled the bank transfer sheet from her bag and held it out with trembling hands. What is this? She asked. Caleb stared at it, his face drained of color. Nora's voice cracked. You took money from him. Caleb's lips parted. No sound came. Damien stood behind Nora, silent but present. A wall. Caleb's shoulders sagged. I didn't want to, he whispered. Nora's eyes filled. Then why did you? Caleb's hands shook. He came to me, he said. 2 years ago. He said you were in danger. He said you'd married into something bigger than you understood. Nora's voice turned cold. And you believed him. Caleb looked up, eyes wet. He showed me things, he said. He showed me your address, your job, your routine. He said if I didn't cooperate, he'd... He'd what? Nora demanded. Caleb swallowed hard. He'd expose the truth about Elise, he whispered. He said he'd tell you things that would ruin your life. He said the Ravenports would come for you if you didn't stay under his protection. Nora's breath caught. Damien's jaw tightened. Nora whispered, "So you sold me to protect me." Caleb's face crumpled. "I thought I was keeping you safe," he said. "I thought Graham looked respectable, powerful. I thought he could keep the past away." Nora's voice shook with fury. "The past is my mother!" Caleb flinched. Nora's tears fell now, hot and relentless. "You looked at me," she whispered, "and decided you could trade my life for your peace." Caleb shook his head, sobbing softly. "I'm sorry," he said. "I'm so sorry." Nora's chest heaved. Damien stepped forward finally, voice low and hard. "You'll testify," Damien said. Caleb froze. Damien's eyes were cold. "You'll sign an affidavit detailing every contact, every payment, every request," he said. "Or we will treat you as part of Locke's operation." Caleb looked at Nora, desperate. Nora's voice was broken but clear. "Tell the truth," she said. "For once." Caleb nodded, shaking. "Okay," he whispered. "Okay." Nora turned away from him, eyes landing again on Elise's photograph. Her mother's smile looked softer than Nora remembered, like she'd been holding back fear. Nora whispered, "Mom, what did you run from?" Damien's voice behind her was quiet. "Everything," he said. The next week was a blur of legal steps and medical appointments and controlled statements. Nora sat with the independent specialist, Dr. Mina Velasquez, who asked her questions about sleep, mood, anxiety, support. Nora answered honestly. She didn't pretend she wasn't afraid. She didn't pretend she wasn't angry. But she also didn't let anyone define her emotions as illness. Dr. Velasquez wrote her report carefully. No evidence of psychosis. No evidence of delusional disorder. Acute stress response consistent with documented coercive control and marital conflict. Nora cried when she read it, not because she needed to be proven sane, but because for once, someone had seen her fear and called it what it was, a rational response. Graham, meanwhile, pushed his narrative through every channel he controlled. A statement from Locke Meridian. "We are deeply concerned for Nora's well-being and the well-being of the unborn child. We are committed to privacy and compassion." Privacy, compassion, words that tasted like poison. Then came the next hit. A tabloid story, anonymous sources, claiming Nora had a history of emotional instability, that she'd been obsessed with conspiracy theories, that she'd been isolated from friends due to erratic behavior. Sloane read it and slammed it down on the table. "They're building a file," she snapped. "A public perception file." Nora's hands shook. "People will believe it." Damien's voice was calm. "Not if we show them the real file," he said. And so they did. Sloane filed a motion demanding discovery of the private investigative report Graham had commissioned. They subpoenaed the agency. They requested communications between Graham and Dr. Halden. They demanded financial disclosures, tracing payments to Caleb and to shell entities tied to consultants. Graham fought back with delays and objections, but every move he made left footprints. And Damien, with his quiet army, compliance analysts, forensic accountants, investigators, followed those footprints like hunters following blood. One night, Damien brought Nora a folder. He placed it on the table and said, "We found something." Nora's stomach tightened. "What?" Damien's voice lowered. "The ring," he said. Nora blinked. "What ring?" Damien opened the folder and slid out a photograph. A clear image of the ring inside the evidence bag. Nora's heart stuttered. "How?" she whispered. Damien's eyes tightened. "Graham acquired it," he said, "through a storage auction tied to Caleb's old unit." Nora's mouth went dry. "That ring, it belonged to my mother." Damien nodded once. "It's a Ravenport ring," he said quietly. "Not flashy, not public. A private family mark Elise used to wear when she wanted to remember who she was." Nora's hands shook as she touched the photograph like it might burn. "Why would Graham want it?" she whispered. Damien's jaw tightened. "Because he thinks symbols matter in court," he said. He thinks he can prove you're obsessed with Ravenport fantasies by putting your mother's ring in evidence. Nora felt sick. Sloane's voice cut in from the doorway. He's trying to turn your blood into your madness, she said. Nora looked up, eyes blazing.
No, Nora whispered.
Damien's gaze held hers. This is what he does, Damien said softly. He reframes reality until he owns it. Nora's voice turned sharp. Not anymore, she said. And that was the moment her fear hardened into something else. Not vengeance, not cruelty, just a decision. Graham Locke would not be allowed to rewrite her. Greyhaven Family Court was even colder in person than it had been in Nora's flash-forward nightmare. The day of the hearing, rain hammered the courthouse steps like a warning. Nora arrived with Damien beside her and Sloane in front of her, moving like a shield. Photographers shouted questions, microphones hovered. People wanted drama. Nora gave them none. She walked steadily, one hand on her belly, the other carrying a small folder of her own. Inside it, her declaration, her evidence, her truth. In the courtroom, Graham sat across the aisle, Vivian Cross beside him. Graham's face was calm again, like the Argent Room slap had never happened. He glanced at Nora and smiled faintly, as if she were a disappointing employee. Nora felt her stomach twist, but she didn't look away. The judge entered. The hearing began. Vivian stood first. Your Honor, Vivian said smoothly, my client is deeply concerned. Mrs. Rowan has recently become fixated on a narrative involving the Ravenport family, an implausible claim that she is connected to Damien Ravenport. This fixation has escalated into public accusations that have harmed my client's reputation and business. We fear she is being manipulated. Sloane rose. Objection. Mischaracterization. Overruled, the judge said, already tired. Vivian continued, voice sharpened. We request an immediate court-ordered psychiatric evaluation, and we request temporary conservatorship over Mrs. Rowan's finances for her safety and the safety of the child. Nora felt the words like hands closing around her. Sloane stood calmly. Your Honor, Sloane said, we oppose. And we have evidence this motion is not about safety, it's about control. Vivian's lips tightened. Speculation. Sloane's gaze was steady. Not speculation, she said. Documentation. Sloane handed the clerk a stack of exhibits. The investigative report, the divorce draft, the bank transfer affidavit signed by Caleb Mercer, now a reluctant witness, but a witness nonetheless. The independent psychological assessment, the subpoenaed emails. The judge flipped through pages, brow tightening. Vivian's calm began to slip. Sloane spoke with a voice that didn't beg. Mr. Locke commissioned private surveillance on his pregnant wife, Sloane said. He drafted a custody request before notifying her of divorce. He attempted to route her toward a consultant psychiatrist tied to corporate families. He paid her stepfather to provide location and routine data for 2 years. Vivian snapped, Objection! The judge held up a hand. I'm reading, he said curtly. Nora's pulse hammered. Then came the moment Vivian had built toward, the ring. Vivian stood again, holding up the evidence bag like a trophy. Your Honor, Vivian said, this ring, an engraved R, is evidence of Mrs. Rowan's obsession with a fantasy identity. She... Objection, Sloane said, voice sharp. Relevance and foundation. Vivian's eyes flashed. It was recovered from... Sloane cut in. From a storage auction purchased by an agent tied to Mr. Locke, she said, which we can prove. And more importantly, it is not fantasy. The judge looked up. Explain. Sloane nodded to Damien. Damien stood. The room shifted as if air pressure changed. His voice was calm, but it filled the space. Your Honor, Damien said, that ring belonged to Elise Ravenport, my mother. Nora's breath caught. Graham's jaw tightened. Damien continued, eyes on the judge. Elise Ravenport fled an abusive marriage, he said. She changed her name to protect her daughter. Nora Rowan is Nora Ravenport by birth. Vivian scoffed. This is a story. Sloane raised a hand. "We have birth records," she said. "We have sealed documents petitioned for release. We have corroboration from a family attorney who handled Elise's legal name change. We have genetic testing, voluntary, court-admissible, confirming Damian Ravenport and Nora Rowan share a parent." The judge's brow furrowed deeper. Vivian's face paled. Graham's calm fractured for the first time. "Your Honor," Graham said suddenly, speaking directly, "this is irrelevant to her stability. This is a distraction." The judge looked at him with a coldness Nora hadn't seen before. "Mr. Locke," the judge said, "you don't get to decide relevance." Graham's mouth tightened. The judge turned to Nora. "Mrs. Rowan," he said, "is it true you were struck by your husband at the Argent Room?" Nora's throat tightened. Every instinct in her, old, trained, wanted to soften the truth to survive. But she remembered the slap, the silence, the way no one moved, and she remembered her baby kicking, alive, depending on her courage. Nora lifted her chin. "Yes," she said. The word was quiet, but it sounded louder than the gavel. The judge looked at Graham. Graham's jaw flexed. Vivian tried to speak, but the judge held up a hand. "I've seen enough to deny the emergency evaluation motion," the judge said. "I'm also denying temporary conservatorship." Nora's breath caught. The judge continued, voice firm. "Mrs. Rowan will maintain full legal and financial autonomy. Custody arrangements will be determined after birth with full consideration of all evidence presented. Mr. Locke, consider this a warning. Any further attempts at coercion or retaliation will be addressed with urgency." Graham's face went hard. Nora felt something like relief, but it wasn't clean. Because this wasn't the end. It was just the first time the court had refused to let Graham own the narrative. As people rose and shuffled, the courtroom buzzed with quiet shock. Damian leaned toward Nora. "You did it," he murmured. Nora's eyes filled with tears again, but these were different. These were the tears of someone who had been listened to. Outside the courthouse, reporters shouted. Nora stopped at the steps. Sloane looked at her, warning in her eyes. "Careful." Nora nodded. She stepped forward and spoke one sentence, just one. Not dramatic, not vengeful, just true. "I'm not asking for pity," Nora said. "I'm asking for my child to be safe." Then she turned and walked away. 2 months later, on a night when Greyhaven's rain fell soft instead of sharp, Nora went into labor. The hospital room was dim and warm, lit by one lamp and the glow of the city beyond the window. Damian sat quietly in a corner chair, not intruding, just present, like an anchor. Sloane had been replaced by nurses and doctors, and the kind of focused urgency that made legal battles feel far away. Nora gripped the bed rail, breathing through waves of pain that felt like the ocean demanding its due. Between contractions, she stared at the rain on the window. It reminded her of the Argent Room, of crystal and silence. It reminded her of the penthouse, of glass and control. It reminded her of the courtroom, of cold air and a ring in plastic. And it reminded her of Elise, her mother, running through rain with a baby in her arms, choosing fear over death. Nora whispered, "Mom, I understand now." The nurse squeezed her hand. "One more push," she said. Nora pushed. And then, a cry. Sharp, alive, unapologetic. Nora's whole body shook as they placed her baby on her chest, warm, wet, real. A daughter. Nora sobbed, laughing and crying at once, overwhelmed by the weight and lightness of her. Damian stood, eyes wet, but he didn't step closer until Nora looked up and nodded. He approached slowly, like he knew he was walking into something sacred. Nora looked at him, voice raw. "She's here." Damian's voice broke slightly. "She's beautiful," he whispered. Nora looked down at her daughter's tiny face, then back up. "What do I name her?" she whispered. The question wasn't only about a baby, it was about identity. It was about legacy. It was about what she would carry forward and what she would refuse. Damian's eyes softened. A name is yours to choose, he said, not his. Nora nodded slowly. She thought of Elise. She thought of running. She thought of hiding. And she realized hiding had saved her. But hiding would not save her daughter. Nora swallowed and said quietly but firmly, "Her name is Elise." Damien closed his eyes for a moment, tears slipping free. Nora held her baby closer. When the nurse returned with paperwork, Nora took the pen. Her hand trembled slightly as she wrote the name she had fought to claim. Nora Ravenport Rowan. Not because she needed a billionaire brother, not because she wanted a dynasty, but because she was done letting men decide who she was allowed to be. Outside the window, rain kept falling, steady, relentless. But inside the room, Nora felt something she hadn't felt in years. A future that belonged to her. Not as a project, not as a key, as a mother, as a woman, as someone who survived and chose not to become cruel in return. If this story stayed with you, if you've ever felt like someone else was trying to write your life in their handwriting, leave a message below, even a single sentence, because sometimes the first step out of a cage is realizing you're not the only one who's ever had to find the door.